Yeah, I tried everything too. It's just so bad.
Okay.
If you want to start, go ahead and do your thing.
Yeah.
No, never mind.
That's okay. No, so just come by tomorrow.
All right, I can do 3:30.
Yeah, okay, I'll see you then. Okay, guys, we can close this up. You do not need to save her. We can close this up. You don't need to save her. And there's a new file that we need to start with. It will be in week 13, although I think I want to do something first because there's still a couple of people who are not back. So I'm going to show you something else that's related to related to calculations, and never mind, I'll show you that at the end because these guys got back. Okay, so in week number 13, in your file, there is an image. It's this one right here. It's underscore MG underscore 2265.cr2. I need you to double click on that guy. It should open up into Camera Raw. If this looks anything unlike my screen, if it looks really dark or light or that kind of stuff, just make sure that this thing is at its default. If you don't have a little default button active right here, you can also check it by using the drop-down menu right here, and you would come down to Camera Raw defaults. And so your image should be relatively plain and look something like this. So in this case, I'm not going to open this as a smart object. It wouldn't matter. You could open this as a smart object, but in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and open it as a regular object. So again, I'm simply holding down the Shift key to open this as an image.
Wait, so we should put all of our settings back to...
Yes. I'll do it again. So double click on this, it comes open into Camera Raw. Either click on this default button right here or come in your drop down menu right here and come down to Camera Raw defaults. Look at my screen to see where I'm at. This will essentially, if there's any adjustments that have been made on this, this will remove all the adjustments and take you back to essentially the default of this image, which is fine, just like it is right now. So I'm going to go ahead and open it as an object. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so our issue with this is that I would like to actually knock this image out, but we've got a real problem trying to do this. We don't have tonal separation because there's areas of the flowers that are light enough that they wouldn't separate if we just tried to separate the highlights of the background. We've got radically different colors here in terms of the tones and all of this. So this is something that, again, would scream for calculations. However, it's more complex than we maybe have been looking at up until this point. It's calculations and then some. So I'm going to do the same trick that I did before, since you guys can't load that action, or in some cases, like I know in Erin's case, hers actually worked, but in our case, we don't need to remake all of these guys. I'm not going to go ahead and run that action on it. I'm simply going to work with an RGB version of this file and a CMYK version of this file. So to get to that, you come up to the image menu again, and you come down to duplicate. So we're just duplicating the image. I'm going to name it CMYK. I'm going to say OK to that. So now I've got a copy of this image that's both CMYK and RGB, and I'll wait for you guys to get this open. So it's in 13, in your folder 13. Open up the image, make a duplicate of it, rename the duplicate CMYK, and then we need to actually convert it so that it is CMYK. So up to the image menu, down to mode, down to CMYK color. Look again up at my screen to see where I'm at. Mode, CMYK color, and it'll say, do you want to rasterize this? And I'll say, no, don't rasterize it. That means it's wanting to no longer be a smart object, but I'm going to not rasterize it. I am going to go ahead and say OK to this. So I've now got a CMYK version of this and an RGB version of this. I'm going to start in the RGB version first, and I'm going to start looking at my channels. So I'm clicking on my red channel, and the only thing say what?
That one's no good, right?
Well, it's good. No, it's actually not bad. It's not bad for the green leaves, but it sucks for everything else. The green channel actually keeps the green just as good, but it brings back in a little bit of the magenta flowers up here. So green would clearly be better. And then blue is actually working really good for the yellow flowers, but not so good for anything else. So I'm going to then go look at my CMYK guys as well. I'm looking at cyan, which is really weak. I'm looking at magenta. Magenta seems pretty good for the flowers up here at the top, and these guys around here, but not really good for too much else. I'm going to look at the yellow, and the yellow actually seems to be really good for the yellow flowers, but again, not these other guys up here at all. And then finally, I'm going to look at the black, and the black has got sort of possibly could help me out in the green leaves and the stuff at the bottom, but really not a whole heck of a lot. So what I've realized in all of this is that I don't really have a single group of channels that's going to get everything. That doesn't exist for me. So I'm going to go back into my RGB channel, and I'm going to click on the RGB guy, and I'm going to do this in 2 different hits. I'm going to do one for the sort of pink magenta flowers and a second one for the yellow flowers. So I'm going to do this in 2 different stages. So I'm going to go looking for the best one in the pink guys first. So again, I'm clicking on the red one, and it is definitely not the red channel. I'm clicking on the green. The green is actually pretty good here. I'm clicking on the blue, and the blue doesn't really help me out either a heck of a lot. So I'm going to click on the green and leave it on because I want to compare. Oh, thank you. I want to compare this green to whatever I might get in my CMYK file. So I'm just leaving the green guy visible. I'm going to come over to my cyan CMYK file. I'm clicking on cyan. That is not helping me there in the magenta at all. I'm clicking on the magenta. That definitely is helping me in the magenta world, whatever. And I'm clicking on the yellow. And the odd thing about the yellow is, look at how different the yellow flower, look at how much separation I'm really getting in these white flowers. I mean, what were the pink magenta flowers from the background. This is actually maybe not the worst thing in the world, because what I don't have in either of the magenta or the green, if I look at the magenta right in here, this flower down here, it's really good for the top guys up here, but this guy right down here, not so good. And when I look at the green channel, it's the same thing over here. This bottom flower right here is not really getting helped out a lot. However, when I look at these two, when I compare the magenta and the green layer, which do you think has better separation for that group of flowers? The magenta, there's no question about it. It's darker. So I am going to use the magenta as my hero. And do I invert the magenta or not? I do invert it, yes, because what I want, again, if I want the flowers to show and the background to be gone, what needs to happen to these flowers in my mask? Do these flowers need to be white or black in my mask? They need to be white, so I have to invert this channel. So it is the magenta inverted. However, my next option, and the one that I think makes the next most sense, that seems to have the best separation for this one flower down here alone, take a look through all your channels. Look at the cyan channel. This flower down here, that sucks. In the magenta, it helps a little bit. In the yellow, that really separates pretty well from the background, and the black is worthless. If I go back into my RGB version of this file, the red down here is worthless. The green down here is better. And the blue down here is also, but again, when I compare the difference, the contrast here, I get greater outline and separation, I feel like, using this yellow channel than I certainly do using this blue channel over here. Does that sort of make sense where I'm going? All right, so I'm going to use the yellow channel as my helper. So using the yellow channel as my helper, do I invert this guy or not? Nope, okay. So back to the RGB version of my file, because that's where I want to do the calculations. So I'm going to click on the RGB version of this file. I'm going to click on so I see the entire thing visible, up to image, down to calculations, and set it up again the way that we've got it on the board right now that we've written it out. So I am doing the CMYK version of this. the layer that I'm actually picking. It says merged layer right here. If we had multiple layers in this file, that would actually mean something. We don't have merged. There are no layers. There's no other layer on here. If I move this guy to the side, there's a single layer here. So it doesn't really matter what you have this listed as. But in our case, I am going to yellow is the channel that I want. It is not inverted. And then I'm going to do the same CMYK for this layer for the source number 2. And that is the magenta layer. And it is inverted. And this is where I'm starting out. So again, I'm going to zoom in to take a look at the quality of the edge of these guys. And I'm going to start with, up at the top, with darken. Not helping me out too much. Multiply. Worse. Color burn. Well, for those 3 flowers, or for that group of flowers that I'm looking for, color burn actually does a bang-up job, don't you think? So that's actually pretty good right now. You know, I keep telling you I'm going to do this. I'm tired of running up to this board to write on this. So I'm taking out my little pad of paper, and I'm going to say that my first option on this was color burn. And I'm going to keep going down to linear burn. Linear burn is worse. It actually made the flowers darker without changing the background. Darker color doesn't matter at all. The lighten group doesn't help me at all. Or the lighten blend mode doesn't. Screen doesn't help me at all. Color dodge, it's possible, but I still think I've got a better thing going with color burn. Linear dodge doesn't help me at all. Lighter color won't help me. Lindsay.
Is there a way to just like use arrows to go through that or something faster?
No, arrows actually change your opacity.
Or like add arrows, like something like
You can actually do keyboard assignments to this stuff, but it's all custom. So at any rate, overlay actually becomes an option for me. Soft light, a weaker version of overlay, doesn't help. Hard light, not really going to help me out that much. Vivid light, again, not helping me out that much. Linear light, nope. Pen light, nope. Hard mix, no. I'm going after what I thought was the best of all of these, which was color burn. What do you guys think? Yeah, but we can get the background actually with, well, here, let's see. Let's just drop down 2 color points really quick. So take one color, hello. Oh, we're going to have to actually say okay to this to do it. Son of a bitch. Okay, I'm just going to hover over this. And I'm getting like somewhere, I'm going to say that averages out to about 150, and I got a background. Oh, that's not going to work. I can't get color readouts on this until I actually go ahead and run the calculation. If
you run it and then undo it, it'll save the setting.
Oh yeah, no, the setting will be sticky. All right, I'm going with you guys. Vivid light. It is. All right, so we'll go ahead and say okay to that. Double click on the hand to kick back out. We need to finish cleaning this part up then if that's what we're going for. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I need flowers to be white, background to be black. So this part that's on these edges is actually working okay for me. So again, I need to run levels on this guy, but I need to put down color points first. So I'm going to do, I don't think I'm going to be able to, this color right here is too close to this color. Don't be too greedy about that. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as this this petal right here, which is almost white, or it actually is white, and a second one out here on the background. So again, I'm going to change my color readouts to be RGB, both of them. This is exactly what we've been doing on everything, every knockout we've done, guys. Command L to bring up levels dialog box. Go ahead and crank this guy all the way up to try to get my background to go to black. Get close, go to the arrow keys. And then I still feel like this background has got contamination in it. I can see it right now. So I'm going to continue with my arrow keys up until I feel like I get rid of all of that. And I feel like I've gotten rid of all of that. And then I'm going to take a look around at the quality of this edge before I actually do it. And the quality of the edge actually seems pretty good. I don't feel like it doesn't look pixelated. It's not all cut. It's not all janky. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. So if you want to use the same, well, wait, I got contamination over here on this other side. So let me see if I can't get rid of this guy as well. I'm going to continue with the arrow keys up on my black point. And make sure that didn't screw up my edge. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. So double click the hand to kick back out. So a good beginning in this. I am not going to try to do overlay brush right now because the next one that I do may clean up some of this other stuff for me. So I'm going to leave it at levels, run the way it is like this, and I'm going to go after the yellow flowers now, and we'll just see what happens. So back up to RGB. I already know that the blue channel is got a really strong separation between those flowers, so I'm going to leave the blue channel visible, and then I'm going to go over to my CMYK version of this file and click on the yellow one to look at the yellow guy. And then again, I'm just looking at these two next to one another. I'm going to zoom in on this guy just a little bit, too much, and then zoom in on this guy a little bit. And I'm looking at the difference in these two. And again, I would argue that the yellow channel actually ends up being better off than the blue channel, just because there's better separation in the background. The background seems to be cleaner to me. And the green flowers, the green branchy parts here seem actually better to me as well. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so I'm going to say the yellow flowers right here. The hero is actually going to be the yellow channel. Is it inverted or not? Why? Okay, so the one thing now I'm looking for a helper now to help me out. I don't need any help with these yellow flowers at all. Those are going to separate beautifully. I don't need any help there at all. I feel like I've already got these top three flowers here, the pinkish ones, whatever, knocked out pretty well. What I'm nervous about are these other flowers, these guys right here, and these guys down here along the bottom. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to grab it in helping me out on this screen right now. I don't know if that's the case. I may have to do a third one of these to actually go after those guys, but I'm going to look for it anyway. So I'm going to go back up to my magenta. The magenta, these guys are relatively dark, so I like that part of it. I'm looking at cyan, that's no help to me at all. I'm looking at black, that's really no help to me at all. So right now, in terms of grabbing these other flowers, the magenta one seems to be helping me the best right now, I think. I'm going to go back into my RGB version of this and do the same trick. I'm looking at the red layer. The red layer actually seems to help right here. It's, again, separating those guys pretty well. The green is even better. It separates these guys better still. And then the blue, again, the blue is actually interesting. It's not helping me as much down here as the green. This green actually gets darker in this part down here. When you click on the blue, don't be distracted by how dark the yellow flowers are. It's these ones along the bottom that I'm nervous about getting. So when I look at the green, that actually helps me more. So it looks like it's a toss-up between the green and the magenta one over here. And you can see that I've sort of got, it's sort of a toss-up. Like some of these down here tend to be darker, but I think overall this channel right here, the green channel, actually seems to me to be consistently better. It's like in the magenta channel over here, these little leaves that are shooting out are not really separating quite as well. So I'm going to go with the green version of this as my helper. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you guys? Yes. Can we what? You can call it anything you want. Say what? Yeah. So hero, sidekick, minor hero. We could actually give them names. We could have, you know, Superman and, I don't know, would Batman be his helper?
Batman and Robin.
Is Batman Superman's bitch?
Batman-
No. Huh?
Batman and Robin.
Oh, so okay, we can call it Batman and Robin. So was Robin Superman, Batman's bitch? Yeah, okay. Okay. All right, so here we go. So my Batman is going to be yellow inverted. And Robin is going to be magenta. Is Robin magenta inverted or not? Why? Why? Exactly. Okay, so back into RGB. Let's set it up and run it. Up to image, down to calculations, and set it up the way we've got it on the board right here. So we have got, for source number 1 is magenta inverted. And then source number 2 is yellow. And it is also inverted. And right off the bat on this, I've still got it as vivid light. And this is actually a relatively good beginning for me, but I'm going to still take it up to the top and start with darken. It's just the way I work. To multiply is worse. Color burn, is actually good for part of it, but I lose all the stuff up at the top. So again, I know I'm going for these flowers here, but I don't feel like I'm getting this stuff up here. So hopefully that's not going to be it. Linear burn, worse. Darker color won't matter. The lighten group. The lighten actually starts to get me someplace I could probably work with. Screen only lightens up the background. It doesn't help me. Color dodge actually helps me quite a bit. It cleans out all of those flowers, and I've still got a background to work with. Then linear dodge. Linear dodge lightens up the flowers, but it also lightens up the background as well. So I'm going to, so far, I'm calling it color dodge seems to be the best so far. Overlay. Overlay is actually interesting. I'm going to go back between color dodge and overlay. It seems like, well, that's a toss-up. Color dodge. All right. Soft light, lighter version of it. Hard light. Hard light is also a possibility. Vivid light is also a possibility. Linear light is actually also a possibility. Pen light, nope. And hard mix, nope. So these are my options. I had color dodge. I feel like I can get all of that stuff with an overlay brush. That's all pretty clean. So that's color dodge. My next one was overlay. I think that complicates things up here, don't you guys? Okay, so I'm going to go back to color dodge. And then I'm going to try hard light. It's just too much to clean out. So I still think color dodge is it so far. And then vivid light. Possible. So that's going to be 1 and 2. And then go back up. Well, I can just drop it down to linear light. Linear light just puts tone back in there. So it's either vivid light right here or color dodge. What's the call? Color dodge? Okay, let's go for it. Say okay to that. Again, I'm going to do the same trick. Don't get too greedy about these things in the middle because really the edge here seems to be pretty separated anyway. So I'm going to pick color points, 2 more color points. And I'm going to set one here, and I'm going to set another in the lighter area of that background. That's my point number 4 right there. Change these as well to RGB color. Command L to bring up levels dialog box and push that up to black. Go to the arrow keys. And my white is still at white. And then before we say okay to this, guys, again, you want to zip around here and take a look at this for a little bit, whatever, just to make sure that we're keeping a decent edge on this. The edge actually looks pretty good. It's not, again, what you're trying to avoid is you don't want this edge to look like it's been cut out. You need it to have a certain sort of softness, like this little bit of softness right in here. All of those parts actually help me out. I've still got color in the background down here in this area right down here. I can see it right here. So again, with black selected, I'm going rogue here. I'm doing it without my color numbers, but I'm going to the arrow keys and I'm just going to start tapping this up one at a time until I see that background, this part actually go. I'm going to hit it 2 more times. And then again, before I say okay to that, continue to check my edges around here. I've still got a little contamination that's right in here. So I'm going to keep pushing that black level up. And that's gone now. Still feel like I've got a decent edge here. Yeah, I'm going to kick back out. And I'm feeling relatively good about this. I'm not going to worry about background over here because that's actually background behind a flower. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. If you want the same as me, I ended up with levels of 98. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Double click on the hand to kick back out. And so now you can see what's beginning to happen here. We've got a reasonably good thing for the flowers down here. Up here at the top up in here, we've got a reasonably good thing for the flowers up here. I'm going to do a little cleanup work down here really quickly just because I can. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a little bit larger brush. I'm going to make sure it's a completely hard brush so that I don't overspray anything. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to their defaults. Hit the X key to get black as your foreground color. And go ahead and paint out the black area, the white area that's in that background right there. There's also a little bit of flower that's right in there that I'm just going to get rid of. So this is just a little bit more solid for me to work with. So up until now, all the work that we've been doing has been non-destructive. You can see that every time you use calculations, it actually creates a brand new channel for us. It doesn't change any of the other channels that are in there. None of these channels have been impacted at all, so we don't need to worry about that part of it. So calculations is non-destructive. As a matter of fact, if you come up to image down to calculations again, just to bring this dialog box open, you can see in the drop-down menu the new results that are possible. You can either do a brand new channel, which is the default, which is what we've been doing. You can do a brand new document that will have only that single channel in it, which is also non-destructive. Or you can load this thing as a selection, which is the other thing that would happen. Again, non-destructive. So calculations itself is always non-destructive. However, apply image is a different beast altogether. So we're going to kick out of here out of cancel. With apply image, what I want you to do first is come into your RGB file. I want you to select the red channel in your RGB file. I want you to then turn on the eyeball for the RGB so you can see the whole RGB image, but you can see that the red channel is actually highlighted right here. Then come up to the image menu down to, it's not going to let me apply image because this thing is a smart object. I knew there was going to be an issue with that. All right, so we need to convert these, our smart objects. We need to go ahead and rasterize these because, again, this is going to be a destructive move, and the smart object is prohibiting us from doing a destructive move. So in both cases, well, you don't really need to worry about the CMYK because we're only going to do this work here in the RGB image. So with this RGB image selected, go ahead and up to layer, down to smart objects, and rasterize your smart object so it's a conventional smart object. Okay, this is a normal one now. So now, again, select the red channel to make it active. Click on the eyeball next to the RGB so that you can see that, again, you can see your whole image, but you can also see that the red channel itself is the active one because it's highlighted. Up to the image menu, down to apply image, and apply image dialog box will open up and your image will change colors. So here's the thing about using apply image. You have to pick the target channel of your that you're going to do apply image to first. And you can see, if you look, remember, we don't have source 1 and source 2 here. We've only got a single source, and then we've got the output. The target right here is determined by the highlight layer. So you can see our target right here is the red channel because we selected the red channel. If you hit cancel out of here and come down and select the green channel and highlight the green channel instead and go up again to RGB, up to image, down to apply image, you'll see that the green is what's being targeted here and your image is actually changing here accordingly. This is a destructive move. Does that make sense what's going on here? And so what's happening here, and let me ask you about this. Let's go back and target the red one. Up to the image, down to apply image. And my image goes cyan. Why? How is it canceling out the red? No, what ends up happening here is you can see that what I'm actually doing now is I'm taking the red channel itself and I'm multiplying it into the red channel again. So it's just like when we did the 2 layers, remember the 2 medium gray layers, and we set the blending mode to multiply, the image got darker. If I make my red channel darker, that's the mask that's controlling the red light. What happens? I subtract red light, which means my image turns cyanic. Does that make sense what's going on here? If you were to set the blending mode, before we even do it, I'm going to change the blending mode to screen. What's going to happen to my image? Why is it going to be red? It does, because again, I'm screening my red channel out, which is making my red lighter, and so my mask on my red channel is lighter, and so my image turns redder. This is how we all used to have to do color control in Photoshop. This was exactly how you did it. But in our case, I'm going to cancel out of all of this. I'm going to come over to the channels that we've actually got going here. I'm going to make a copy of my Alpha 2 channel because if I fuck this up, I don't want to have to rebuild it. So I'm going to make a copy of Alpha 2 by simply dragging it down. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Let's actually name these guys. I'm going to name Alpha 1. This is the pink flowers. And Alpha 2 was the yellow flowers. And I'm going to throw Alpha 2 copy away just because I'm too lazy to type that again, and then make a copy of yellow flowers so that I've got a yellow flower copy. Does that make sense what's going on here? Okay, I'm going to leave yellow flower copy highlighted. I'm still going to turn on my eyeball. But again, it is highlighted. That's why you got this, again, this is supposed to symbolize a ruby lift. The same thing happens with all the stuff that we do in any mask situation, any channel, whenever you've had the visible eyeball on. But I do have it as actually, it's highlighted, it is active. I'm going to come up to the image menu, down to apply image. Sorry. Actually, I take that back. I'm not going to leave the eyeball on. I want to see what this really does. So I'm going to just have it highlighted alone and only its eyeball on. I'm going to come up to the image menu, down to apply image. And then I am going to, for my layer that I'm going to merge into it, I'm going to click on the drop-down menu and I'm going to pick the pink flowers. Because what I'm trying to do is add the pink flowers to this channel. Does that make sense? I don't want to invert anything because, again, these masks are already correct to begin with. They're both where I want them to be lighter. They are both lighter. But in terms of my blending mode, again, I'm going to go, I know it's clearly, it's not going to be a darkening. It's not going to be in the darkening group. I'm going to go immediately to the lightening group. And you can see right off the bat in Lighten that I am beginning to build this entire mask. I've got some issues that I've got around in here, but for the most part, this is the beginning of a relatively good mask. So Lighten is an option for me. I'll keep that. Again, I feel like I'm keeping a relatively good edge. I'm going to screen. It's actually slightly better. It pulled out just a little bit of something else in the middle. Color dodge doesn't help me at all. It adds stuff back in. Linear dodge actually helps me as well, because linear dodge actually is a straight add. I'm going to go to the overlay group. Doesn't help me. Soft light. None of these contrast ones are going to help me out at all in this. Vivid light doesn't help me. Linear light, nope. Pin light, nope. Hard mix, nope. None of those guys are helping me. So it is either lighter. I said screen actually cleaned a little bit. Yeah, screen actually cleans a little bit more of that out, or linear dodge, which cleans a little bit more of those guys out. Does that make sense what's going on here? Okay, so then go ahead and say okay to that. Now, we've still got a little bit of work left to do on this, but you see what I mean about not doing all of that overlay brush work. We didn't need to do any of that stuff. I'm going to zoom into this area up here at the top. I am going to go to the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make sure it is a hard brush. I am going to go to an overlay brush on this because I'm lazy. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Hit the D key to default my foreground and background colors to their default colors. If white is your background color, hit X to make it your foreground color. And I'm simply going to clean these areas out. If there's an area like this guy right down here that you suspect maybe is background, you need to check to see if that's background. That's not. That's the end of some stem. So I don't think that's background. That is a stem. If you turn off your channel copy, you can see it's a white stem, the center of a white stem. So that's not background. So again, I'm going to turn the eyeball on this off. So this goes, again, if you can't really get it hard, you can actually change your overlay brush back up to normal because I'm in the inside of all of this stuff. This guy down here, though, is background. I'm fairly certain. So again, I'm going to click on that. That is background, so I want to leave him alone. Let's zoom back out a little bit. Again, with a completely hard brush, whatever, I can get all this stuff. It's just when I get up close to these edges that I think it's just safer to go to an overlay brush and just clean those guys out. Stay away from the edges if you can, because again, those soft edges are something that we want to keep. And now I'm just working my way around I'm holding down the space bar to sort of work my way all the way through the image to inspect my mask. This area right over here, I'm fairly certain that that is flower. Actually, let me turn the layer mask off. Yep, that is actually flower right there. So in my layer mask, that actually needs to go. That was the wrong way. That needs to be white, not black. That's all cleaned up. That's cleaned up. That's cleaned up. I'm pretty sure that's background right there. That's cleaned up. So is that. I'm certain this is background here as well. That is. I think that's background here as well. It is. I can get all of that. This little spot down here that I cannot get with an overlay brush, you have to go to a normal brush to get it. And while I'm on a normal brush, none of this stuff is close to the edges, so I don't need to worry about any of that. That is background right there, I'm certain. So I'm just going to clip this edge like this. That's all flower. I think these are background. I'm pretty sure they are. They are. And I think that should actually get bumped up a little bit. So I'm going to go back to overlay, make sure that black is my foreground color, and get these a little bit heavier. Again, hit the X key to go to white, clean up this edge right here. Now, this is the only real problem spot that I've got on this flower, and it's right here. So for me, I'm simply going to hit the pen key to get the pen tool. And I'm going to start up here like this. And I'm going to draw the pen tool right along that edge, come out here to complete my path, go to my path, command click to load it as a selection, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and put like a 0.5 on it, a half a pixel radius. And say okay to that. And then this area, again, back in working on my flowers down here, that guy actually gets changed. It just gets filled with white. Command D to deselect. Back to my brush. I can go to a normal brush right now. It's still a completely hard brush. Make it a little bit smaller. Clean up all of that. And all of that. I think that may be background as well. It is. This is not. I don't know what this is. That is all background. Double click on the hand and I'm done. So, to see how well we did on this, are you guys good on this? Okay, see how well we did on this. Let's make a copy of our background layer. Let's actually select the bottom copy and create a blank layer in between the two. Hit the D key to default your colors to black and white. Command delete will fill that bottom with white. I'm actually going to command click to load this mask now. Come up to my layer, the guy that I'm actually doing this on, and click to add a layer mask to that. And voila. And look at the quality of the edge that you guys have on this thing. This is insane. I'm telling you this right now. If you go in for a retouching audition and you do this, people will not know what to say. They will just look at you stupefied. There is another advantage to actually having this process go the way this whole process went. So what I would like you to do now is, we've still got pink flowers and we've got yellow flowers that were masks that we actually created. So I would like you to load the pink flowers as a selection. Command click to just load that. And then I want you to come over to, we're going to add an adjustment layer on the top of this, and I'm going to add solid color to this. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I came in with black, so I'm going to go ahead and add black to that. And command click to actually go ahead and commit that to it. And then I'm going to change the blending mode of this to color. And you can see that the sort of control that you end up getting in this, that ends up just being insane in terms of what you end up, in terms of being able to recolorize stuff. One of the exceptions that I have to this, though, that I think is a problem with this, is that this is sort of an all or nothing mask. If you actually take a look at the mask itself, if you want to look at the mask that we're doing that's on this layer right now, hold down the Option key and click on it, and you can see it's basically everything. It's a very successful mask because basically everything is like black and white, and that's really the only thing that we've actually got going for us here. You know, there's no subtlety in this. There's no, it's either all on or it's all off. And so you can see that in doing this, well, it works well, and it can make for an interesting sort of like compositional element in terms of doing this. But for me, I prefer to actually, when I'm doing color work like this or recoloring work like this, I actually prefer to work with what I call luminosity masks. And so to see what those look like, we're actually going to revisit this somewhat. I want to come up and just, in our RGB image, I want to take a look at the red channel by itself again. I'm going to turn off all the layers that we just did. I'm going back to my original mask, and I'm just taking a look at the red channel, and I don't have a whole lot of action in here. I'm going to look at the green, and I feel like I do have quite a bit of action going on in here. And I'm going to look at the blue. I'm looking for the pink flower group. That's what I'm really looking at. And I don't feel like I'm really getting what I'm really wanting to get out of this. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. I'm going to go look at the CMYK group again. And again, I'm taking a look at this, and I feel like I've got a lot of separation that's actually happening here in this CMYK group right here. So I am going to make a new luminosity mask. I'm going to go back to what our original one was when we decided, when Ari convinced me that we should actually do vivid light instead of the other one. I'm actually going to go back in here, and so again, I'm going back to Hero just because I remember it. And so for my hero, I'm going to start with my magenta inverted because that's INV, because that's what I'm actually trying to do. I'm trying to make a luminosity mask for that group of flowers right there. And then I'm going to see if anything else will help me out. And I figured that the yellow flowers would actually help separate that out as well. So I've got the yellow regular. It is not inverted. And so I'm going to go back and do the calculations again, but this time I'm not looking for a complete mask, and I'll show you why. So back up into the RGB channel. Go ahead and select RGB as the full image to be working on. I'm going to come up to the image menu, down to calculations, and I'm going to set it up a way. I've actually got it here. So on my top one, I do have the CMYK but it is yellow channel as my source 1, and it is not inverted. It is regular. And then I'm going to go to my source 2, and my source 2 is magenta, and it is inverted, so that part is correct. And then I am going to, again, make sure I've got that set up. Yeah, that's correct. I'm going to go up to the darken group and see what's actually happening here. And this is what I'm talking about by a luminosity mask, is something that looks a little bit more like this, something that's actually got some veining in it. Again, not a complete black or white situation. So I'm looking at darken. I'm going to look at multiply. That may help me a little bit more. Color burn, this is actually what I'm really looking for. This is a perfect luminosity mask right here, in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So everybody has this set up, something looks like this. Go ahead and say OK to that. And then look at the difference in this. We're going to actually come down here. I'm going to look at my alpha 1. I'm going to call this pinks and magenta luminosity. I ended up using, I don't know, so I'll tell you. Color burn. So I'm going to call this pinks, magenta, or just pinks luminosity. And say OK to that. And now I'm going to do the same trick that we just did. So if you come back over, let's turn everybody else back on. We'll come back up to the very top so that you can see the whole RGB guy. So selecting RGB. And again, looking over, here's the difference. This is using that solid color layer set to a color blending mode with essentially a black and white mask on it. So I'm going to do a history snapshot of this first. So into history, click on history, click on snapshot, and I'm going to call this full mask. And then I'm going to turn this guy off, and I'm going to do the same thing again, though. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to load the pinks luminosity mask first. That loads it as a selection, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to add a solid color. It is going to be black, so I'll go ahead and say OK to that. And you can see now the difference in what's actually going on here. This, because it is a luminosity mask, actually introduces variation and veining into this. So I am not completely hitting this with a black color. I'm going to actually change its blending mode to color as well. And you can see it completely changes the outlook of this. This is actually keeping it, keeping some of the color in it. I'm going to do a snapshot of it. And then I'm also going to do change this blending mode of this guy back to normal and do a final snapshot of that. And these are the three different snapshots that I've got then up at the top. I've got the full mask, looks like this. It basically, because it's a color blending mode, basically hits this entire thing as a full mask and just strips all the color out. We can also do this as a normal blending mode, and you'll see that it just fills that because the mask itself is completely open. It's letting in nothing but all the black is hitting this. So this thing goes just jet black. If you want to do Andy Warhol posters, this would be a great way of doing it, but that's not, for me, the look. But look at the difference. I'm going to go ahead and snapshot this guy as well. Look at the difference in the full mask of this set to a normal blending mode and the version 3 of this, where this actually has got the luminosity mask is controlling this. It's not letting all of the black go through. It's letting some of the black go through in some areas completely, less in other areas. Does that make sense what's going on here? I don't know about you guys, but I think that is absolutely a beautiful color. And it all comes about because I'm using luminosity masking. I'm not going in there and having it all either white or all black. I'm actually got some variation that's actually happening in here. Does that sort of make sense where we're going? Are there questions about this? Okay, I've got one last one for you guys to do. You can close this guy up. You don't need to save it. But I do want to take a pause here and just say how incredibly far you guys have come in this. Do you realize the scale and the level that what's happening right now? This is so far beyond what most people, I would say 99% of the people who work in Photoshop know. And you all know this. And you all know it from a place that's instinctive for you. It's, you know, it's not, I mean, I've seen people try to do calculations before and they just start to guess. They guess at every channel, and they guess whether it's inverted or not, and then all the blending modes. And we figured it out before. If you look at 7 channels here as your 2 possibilities, somebody whip out a calculator really quick. 7 times 7 is 49. And then in terms of the blending modes, you can double, you can either, they can be inverted or not. So times 7 again, or 49 times 49. So do 7 to the 4th. We're not ended yet because now we have 21 blending modes. So multiply that times 21. 50,421. So people who go into calculations have over 50,000 options and they just start to guess. I have at least narrowed yours down to, you know, well, again, the 21 blending modes because we pretty much know going into it. So instead of 50,000 guesses, you got 21, which isn't the end of the world. And actually, out of the 21, you really probably only use 18 or so anyway, or 6 out of 21, so 15. Okay, one last file I want to open up, and it's actually in class 12. It's last week's class. If you actually look at it, oh, there's something else that I've got here that I want to show you guys as well, because we're going to have time to get to it tonight. Yeah, it's a cheerleader file. So, how would you color correct this file? What is this file, first off? Well, I mean, what do you think it is? It's a scan of a print, probably, right? And why is it so red? Because it's old. It's old. No, that's exactly right. It's old. What happens to photographs as they age? They don't only turn red. That's not altogether true. What happens to photographs, printed photographs that sit in store windows? They don't completely fade. They shift colors. They become cyanic, don't they? That's all because of things. Photographs do not fade evenly. They don't just sort of like keep their perfect color and just start to fade away. They actually have a radical color shift in them, which is what's happening here. Can you fix this? How? Put the cyan filter on it, right? No, that doesn't work. So what is the real problem here? When this thing faded, what happened? It's a photographic print. So in photographic prints, you do have CMYK, and again, it's a subtractive color. So what happened? The cyan faded. That's what's happened. The other colors have remained here, but the cyan has faded. What is the complement of cyan? Red. So if you take a look at the red channel specifically here, you'll see what ended up happening. Is that when this thing got scanned, because there is a lack of cyan in here, when it's scanned red. There's a dominance of red. The mask here for the red part of this is too opened up. This red channel here is too light. Look at your other 2 channels compared to this guy. Look at the green guy. And then look at the blue guy. They're clearly got much more detail and richness in them than this red channel. However, the problem that you run into with this is that, yes, you can put a curve on this guy. So you could come down here and put a curve on this guy, and you could come into the red channel, and you could try to suck some of the red out, and you can sort of get there a little bit, whatever. But what you're missing in this is the detail in this channel. If you, again, I'm going to turn the eyeball off on this. If we simply click on the red channel to look at it, turn the eyeball off. Sorry, come down to the background layer. Just look at the red channel. Zoom into this. You are losing detail in here. Look at this little girl. Her face is incredibly smooth, but look at this, her shirt right here. This part right here, if you look at the green channel here, you can actually see texture in this guy. You can actually see texture in this girl's sweater right here. You can actually see it right here, whereas in the red channel, that's just gone. There's no texture in here. So when you use a curve to bring the cyan back into this, you can do the color correction, but you can never restore the texture in this because it's gone, right? So is there a way that I can build texture into the red channel? And I can use the other channels. And so how would you do that? Well, you could do this. You can actually come to the green channel and you can do Command A to load it and then Command C to copy it. I think this will work. And then back up into the red channel, Command V to paste it in, and you've just pasted all of the green information into the red channel. And then if you come up to the top and look at your RGB guy, you can see that now your image is too green. That's a destructive move as well. However, that's how we used to have to color correct in here. But I would say that that's probably too extreme, wouldn't you guys? Okay, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to undo that here. So how else can I bring channel information, other channel, either green or blue channel information into the red channel? Apply image. It's exactly how you do it. So to do this, if you've got an active selection going, hit Command D to deselect. Again, to use apply image, it is destructive. You cannot be doing this on a smart object. I'm going to throw my curve away right now because I don't need it. Make the red channel selected. I'm going to go ahead and click on the eyeball so I can see what the color correction is going to be. But again, you have to set the target for apply image. You have to pick that channel first. You can't pick it after you start apply image, and you can't pick it from the apply image dialog box. You've got to highlight it to begin with, up to the image menu, down to apply image, and you will see that in apply image that again the red channel is what is being targeted right here. Now in our case, I have got information that's in the green channel and in the blue channel. I think the blue channel is actually too blocked up. I'm going to exit out of here really quick just to show it to you. I think the blue channel is too black, the area that I'm trying to get information in. This is not detail I want to put in my other image. There's also looks like there's a it looks like a water ring. It looks like a glass ring is in the blue channel. That's where you pick up noise and stuff. But this is not detail that I want, where actually in the green channel, this is detail I want. So the green channel is the one I'm going to blend it into this, guys, what I'm trying to say. Okay, so again, with the red highlight, the red channel is highlighted. The eyeball on the RGB channel is visible, so I can see what's really going to happen. Come up to image, down to apply image. Again, red is the targeting channel. I am going to blend the green channel into it. I'm not inverting the green channel. I want exactly all of that color to actually be in there. And then again, I'm going to go through my blending modes. I'm going to start with darken. And actually darken, I think, is too strong. I'm going to go to multiply. Possibly still too strong. Color burn, way too weird. Linear burn, too weird. Darker color. Again, not going to help me out. The lighten group only does worse things for me. This is only going to make things redder. I'm going to go to the overlay group. The overlay group starts to actually get somewhat interesting to me. I've still got a red wash in here, but at least I can use my preview checkbox to see it's actually taken out some of the red. Soft light, a milder version of that. Hard light, it just blocks all of that stuff up, so it's defeating my purpose. Vivid light, doesn't do it. Linear light, doesn't do it. Pin light, nope. Hard light, nope. So I'm going to go back up. It was in the darkening group. And I'm going to go back here to darken to begin with. This to me, I felt like had the most success in it. I'm seeing like neutral colors in here, whatever. I feel like it's a little bit too strong in a lot of areas right here. So the one thing that we haven't gotten to that you need to remember is that we've actually got an opacity slider in this. So we can take the opacity of this and start to drop this down to restore some of that normal color back to this guy. And I'm down to around a 40 or 50% opacity. And I would say that that is a vast improvement on where we were here in the beginning. Again, you will get calls to do this all the time. Can you fix this? I have no idea. You have no idea how many instructors here have called me up and said, Verser, I've got all these faded photographs that are all the colors like really fucked up in them. How do you fix this? And this is how you do it. If you say okay to this, again, that was a destructive move. If we simply look at our red channel, though, you can see the difference in what just happened. So again, I'm going to turn everybody else off so that we're only looking at the red channel. This is what our red channel looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. So you can see that using Apply Image brought tone and detail back into the red channel, which also restored, well, it did two things. It's restoring texture in this. It's building more texture back into it, but it's also taking the red color out. Questions about this? Say what? Oh yeah, it's still really red. So again, there's other things that you might have to do to this. We've actually pulled stuff back in. What I would do next on this, because again, it's going to be an imperfect world, but I would actually add a curve to this. And in the curves dialog box, you've got these three highlight pickers that are over here. You can do this strictly by eye. I mean, you can actually pick a part in here. So I'm going to look at something in here that I think should be a neutral color. So if I hover over the white, I'm going to actually drop a color sampler point on the white. So color sampler tool. I'm going to click one right here in the white of the back of the door right here, but I'm going to also do another one up here in the shadows. And you can see that you still have a dominance of red. These should be neutral colors, which mean these guys actually right here should also be the same color. Make sense? So we're going to start with the point on the very top. If you can see my point number 1, which is in the highlight right here, it's reading a 235, 214, 199. What I do is I add those up. So who's got a quick calculator? Could you add 235, 214, and 199 together and tell me what you get? Divided by 3. Nobody's doing this? Okay. So add 235 to 214 plus 199.
Wait, what's 213?
214. I'm just adding these values. See, look at these values right here. The RGB values are my point number 1. I'm adding those 3 up and then divided by 3. I'm just getting the average of these.
It's 5.
It's what?
3.
It can't be 5.
I got 146 for mine.
It can't be 146 either. So 235 plus 214 plus 199 divided by 3. It's got to be around 215 or something. 216. Okay, so that's my target for this guy right here. So I'm going to write down 216. We need to do the same thing for the shadows. So in the shadows down here, add 142 plus 91 plus 63 and divide that by 3.
It's 98.
98. All right. So that's going to be what I'm going to try to do with my curve on here. So with my curve, I'm going to select the red channel. I'm going to select the targeting adjustment tool, and I'm going to click on this point number 1, and I'm looking at the readout right here, and I want that point number 1 to be 216. So again, targeting adjustment tool right here, red channel, click, pull this down to 216. Then also, it actually pulled this part down in here. In the point number 2 right down here, I'm going to select on that, and it's supposed to be 98. So I'm going to click on this guy right here. It says point number 2 right here. Sorry, it was already clicked. Point number 2, and drag that up a little bit to 98. And that's the curve that it ended up doing for the red channel. In the green channel, I'm actually going to do the same thing. The green channel, I'm going to do targeting adjustment tool. My point number 1 right here should be, I'm going to take this 214 up to 216. And again, this green point right here, this 94, it's the shadow point right here. So I'm going to click on that, and that 94 needs to go up to 98. And you can see when you change certain things, they change other things as well. You can see that my red is at 217 now, not 216, and it's also at 100. But these are really very close. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Finally, going into my blue channel right here, and in the blue channel on my number 1 point, I'm going to click on that, and that needs to go up to 216. And then again, this point number 2, I'm going to click on that, and that needs to go up to 98. And this may be too much of a stretch for this guy, but we'll see. Yeah, I think that pumps in too much blue. So I'm just going to eyeball this and back that off. Things were looking reasonably good up until that point. So around the 76-ish, something like that. So that's neutralized my whites in here. I'm going to double click on the hand to jump back out. I feel like the whole image needs to be brightened though. So in brightening the image, we've got a couple of options. You can do it with the RGB, just the RGB curve of this. We could actually open this up to actually do that. That would be one way of doing it. The way I prefer to lighten stuff up again would be more based on a blending mode. So I'm going to simply add another curve on top of this. I'm going to change the blending mode of that curve to screen. You don't actually have to, you can do it with just an adjustment layer. You don't have to make a copy of the background. Again, that's too strong, so I'm actually going to then take the opacity of it and drop it back down. And then if I feel like this curve hit it too hard, which I do, I'm going to just drop the opacity of that color correction curve as well to reintroduce a little bit of the sort of warmth in all of this guy. Yeah. And so that's where I ended up. Again, are you going to get this perfect again? That's going to be a really tough one. But this, we'll do a snapshot of this guy. This is where we started. This is not. This is where we landed. This is where we started. From that to that. I'd say that's a pretty seriously well done. Okay, are there questions about this? Or you make it purple like that because it looks cool. Okay, you can close this up. We got one last thing to look at, guys, that I completely forgot about. But it's here. So it's also in last week. It's in week number 12. It's displacement maps. And so in displacement maps, there are two JPEGs in here. There's also a link to a Photoshop tutorial. The Photoshop tutorial has actually got, it does essentially what we're doing here, but the figure that they've got is more, the effect is more pronounced, but I wanted to have something that you guys could actually do this with. So we are going to open up Muscle Guy here, dragging this down. Oh, you don't have this Photoshop tutorial here? Oh, you just, okay. I will post this on our website. I'll put this in the, I'll put it up in class announcements. Or I'll just click on it and show you where it is. No, I'm not going to do that because Lord knows it'll fuck up the video. Okay, so open up Muscle Guy into Photoshop. And go ahead and say OK to this. Open up the tattoo design, also in Photoshop. And I'm going to hide everybody else. So essentially what I want to do is put this tattoo on this guy. So I'm going to put it down here. Let's put it down here on the lower part of his arm where he's got some, Well, I'll take it back. Maybe the upper part of his arm here. What I'm looking for is where he's actually got some dimension. Or maybe we'll do it right across this area. Yeah, in a weird way. So you can just sort of, I mean, we'll see. Let's just drag the tattoo on top of the photo image guy right here. And then you can close up the tattoo part. You don't need to keep that anymore. I'm going to turn this guy. Yeah. Okay, so I've got him in place. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. I am going to, this is basically a black and white image. I need to get rid of the white part of this image. So there's a number of ways I can do it. I could actually just do the magic wand tool, but I want to show you guys that this, another part of this that we haven't talked about that deals with blending modes. If you come onto this layer number one, so the layer, you've got 4 areas of this layer that actually are operational. You've got the eyeball that's right here. You've got the actual pixel layer that's here, so you could go in and paint on that guy. You've got the name of the layer right here. If you double click on the name, we can actually rename that to tat. And then finally, this area that's over here, if you double click on this area that's over here, this opens up the layer style dialog box. And in the layer style dialog box, there's a number of issues that you can do here. There's a number of things that we've already talked about here. This is where you do drop shadows, and you can do overlays, and you can get stuff to glow, and you can do all of that. That's not what I want to do here. What I want to do here is this. It's this thing that says blend if, this blend if layer right here. And what these guys do is they control what you see in your image, the result in your image. So for instance, right now in the underlying layer, we've got the full tonal range of the underlying layer is being revealed to us. If you grab the white slider here and drag it back like this, you'll see that there's no change that actually happens in here. What's happening is it's beginning to eat through the layer of this upper layer up in here. That's not what we want. Instead, what we want to do is use the upper layer, and you will see as you start to pull this image right here, what you are saying now is that you want everything in this layer that is between black and 244 to be visible. Everything from 244 to 255, you do not want that result to be in your image. If you crank this guy all the way back to 255, you get the white background back again. If you now grab the black slider and drag it in this direction, you will see that the tattoo starts to disappear because you are saying you don't want anything that is in this black area to be in your resulting image. If you zoom into this guy, you will also notice, though, that you get an edge on this, that you get a jagged edge on that. And that is because this jagged edge is not in this underlying layer. You need to continue to keep cranking this up. And you'll see that you start to crank this up eventually, this whole thing will actually go away. However, usually these moves, in our case right now, we've got a black and white layer. You don't worry about the edge transitions because you'll just crank this guy back, whatever, and everything will be fine. If, however, you were worried about the edge transitions, the way you deal with an edge transition to smooth it out so that it's more gradual is you would drag this guy back till it's beginning to go. Then you would hold down the Option key and click on this triangle, and it will split apart. And you will now see, if you look up at my screen, what you are now telling Photoshop you want to happen is this, that you want everything from 228 to 225 to be completely removed from your image. Then you want the area from 230 to 182 to gradually ramp down. And then finally from 182 all the way to 0 to be in your image. Does that make sense what's going on here? We good on this? Say what? Oh, I know. So go ahead and say okay to that, and we've actually now got our tattoo that we can actually do this with. I'm going to double click on the hand again. I'm going to hit the Command T to transform this. I'm going to rotate it slightly. I'm going to bring it over to this side of his arm. I'm going to hold down the Shift key so that this transforms in not in perspective, but in ratio. Again, I don't like seeing the little handles on the side, so hit Command H to get rid of them. It'll allow you to do your transform a little bit better. And what I'm basically going to do, let's actually do it here on the upper part of his arm right here. We'll have this is going to be a weird tattoo. It sort of started on his pec right here. It's just going to be weird, but that's how I'm going to do mine. just so that you can actually see how this works. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK to actually do that. Then you can zoom in on this guy slightly. But this just looks like it's laying on his arm. This does not look like this is actually a part of his arm. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to move him. So the V key, I'm trying to find a place where you're really going to be able to see this. Let's,
Under his belly button.
okay, we'll take it down to his abs.
Reverse trace.
Okay, actually, we'll do this. We'll do this. Okay, we're going to do a really bizarre tattoo here. Command T. No, I'm going to rotate it even more. I'm going to do it straight up and down, and we'll do it right across his abs like this. So that's how I'm going to do mine. Okay. But you can see that it does not look like this is curving in and out the way that a tattoo actually would be. This thing would actually undulate being on his body like this. So to do this, you need what's called a displacement map, and that's what we're going to do here. However, we need to make a displacement map first. So to make this displacement map, what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and duplicate this image. So up to the image menu, down to duplicate. Go ahead and say OK to that. You've got an exact copy of it. In this case, I want to throw away the tattoo. You need to change this thing to black and white right now. So I'm going to go up to the select menu, to add an adjustment layer on here. I'm going to turn it into a black and white image, and I'm going to go ahead and merge this down. I need a single layer of this. So Command E will merge that down. This is now a black and white image. I'm also now going to bump the contrast on this image. So I'm going to add a curve to this guy, and I'm going to actually use one of the defaults in here. I'm just going to increase the contrast on this guy. Again, the more intense your contrast is, the more intense the displacement mapping will actually be. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to go ahead and merge this down as well, Command E. And then finally, you need to blur this slightly. So I'm going to come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to hit it with like a 3. That's what I'm going to hit mine with. So I'm going to hit mine with a 3 on that. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then you need to save this, and you need to save it as a Photoshop file. So up to the Save As menu, dialog box comes up. You do not want to save this as a JPEG. That will not work. You need to save it as a Photoshop file. So I'm just coming up to the format. I am going to save it in the folder that it just came from. Where the hell is the folder that it just came from? Oh, displacement maps. I'm going to save it to that folder. And then I'm going to close this guy up, and I'm not going to keep it any longer. Then back in your tattoo layer, on that tat layer, you're going to come up to the filter menu, down to distort, down to across to displace. And a dialog box will come up, and now these values are the suggested values, but they're not the only ones to use. So we're going to try just here with a vertical and a horizontal scale of 10, and we'll just see how this works. There's other things here. When you do stretch to fit, it would be if you were displacing, say you had like a rock face and you wanted to stretch your displacement map to fit the entire image. There'd be reasons to actually have this stretch to fit. Most people leave this checked on. Tiling will actually take an image, your displacement map, and do multiple versions of it and sort of tile them together. It doesn't really have an application in what we're trying to do right here. Again, in undefined areas, I would leave repeat edge pixels is all that I would leave. So these are the settings that I would leave on here as our defaults. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that, and it's going to say choose an image to be your displacement map, and you want to choose that Photoshop file that you actually just made, and go ahead and say open. It will do this displacement, and you can actually see now in this case, if we do an undo and a redo in here, that it actually is doing a displacement on this. It's actually bending the tattoo. You can see it especially around this ab right here. It's actually bending the tattoo. It's distorting it based on the highlight and shadow of your displacement map. It's actually doing it here as well. Now, there's other things that we need to do to actually make this more convincing. Number one, it would never be this dark, so you actually need to pull the opacity of this guy back off so that you let a little bit more of this come through. And then finally, you can say, okay, well, I don't feel like that displacement was strong enough. So you can actually go back in history, and we can do it again. So I'm going to do another displacement map. So again, up to the distort menu, across to displace. and change your scale values now to 15, both. And say okay to that. And again, pick the same file to do your displacement. And you can see now that it's actually distorted it more. Now, in my case, I think it's distorted it too much. So let's try this. Let's go ahead and leave it distorted like that. Do a snapshot of this history, and we'll call that, this is a displacement of 15. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to undo it. And then I'm going to do another displacement. Your tattoo pixelated?
Yeah. Like all the edges of it is torn up. I did the first displacement.
Oh, wow, they sure did. Undo your displacement, and let's go back and see how it was set up again. So then go back up to displace. Filter, distort, displace. In your case. Wow. And go ahead and say okay.
Is it blended stuff?
No, I don't think it is.
There's an edge on it, right?
I changed it a little bit because I thought that's what it was, but it didn't really seem to help.
Yeah, okay, so let's try this instead. Undo that. And,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so let's do this. Go ahead and bring your blending mode, bring the white all the way back on. And, oh, that, yeah, possibly. Crank it all the way back on, all the way back on. Good, say okay. Grab the magic wand and hit on, uncheck contiguous and click on the white and just delete it. Command Z to undo that. I thought it was actually at a selection going, so use your magic wand to click on the white.
Oh.
Sorry.
No.
So let's click it, and then I'll hit delete.
Yeah, delete.
Yeah, and Command D to deselect, and now do your displacement on this.
Oh, displacement on that.
Yeah, don't do the blending. And say okay. Open up your Photoshop file again really quick and drag it on top of this. Make sure that nothing got resized.
The other one?
Yeah, the black and white one. Just drag this file on top of this guy. Hold it,
Okay.
undo it and hold down the shift key. And then just turn it on and off and see if it's in register.
Blurred.
I hit the blur. It didn't really seem to blur very much, but
But you also forgot to like merge down your
The curve.
oh, I don't think I merged down the curve. Or,
Yeah, on your other file, the curve.
Try
wasn't
taking it,
merged
and that
down.
might be it. Otherwise,
For which file?
this one
Oh,
right
this one
here.
here.
So Command, because it may be picking up something weird again. It needs a
I
flat
merged
file.
down the,
And so you might not have blurred. You
Yeah,
might have
okay.
blurred the curve and not blurred the image.
yes,
Because that's
Yeah, so click on this guy again.
this one.
Do like a 3-point blur on that. Save it and then try it. Okay, anyway, the last thing to tell you guys really quick. Okay, so the displacement map, in my opinion, the 10-point guy was a better version of this. So I'm going to go ahead and put 10 back into here, 10 back into here. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Again, pick the same image. Go ahead and say okay to him as well. It does a little bit of distortion. Snapshot that and call it 10. And then we can actually go back and forth between our two snapshots and see which one we feel like was actually better as far as the distortion part goes. And again, I'm going with the 10. I think that's better. I am going to drop the opacity of this. And then finally, I'm not going to drop the opacity that much. Finally, I've still got a white edge around this, so clearly I didn't get the layer off quite as much as I wanted to. So I'm going to still double click on the style because I think I can still hit this harder and crank this back down even more to get rid of any edge that was actually on there. Say okay. But then finally, you can transform this. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, and then go into warp. Click on the warping right here. You can continue to actually try to emulate how this would actually be. So you would see right here, if his stomach, if this ab right here is actually coming out, this would actually distort slightly in this direction and slightly in this direction. Whereas this distortion right in here would probably actually push in a little bit here, so that you can go in and continue to really warp this to try to get this to actually simulate riding across his skin tone or across his the dimensions of his skin better. Does that sort of make sense? Lindsay?
What would you do to make it look or match the skin texture?
Probably once I get it here like this, I would do this. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Instead of dropping the opacity right now, I'm going to crank the opacity back up. I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply. And that I didn't see anything either. So I'm going to look at the other blending modes, but I'm not seeing any of those guys go down anymore like that. So go back to multiply as well, and then drop the opacity as well on this guy. And now that actually begins to come in a little bit more. I've got a little more of his skin tone in there. If you feel like that now this color is too light, actually I just think it's too precise. It's too perfect. So I would probably blend the tattoo as well. So I mean blur the tattoo some as well, because it's just too perfect.
Maybe you just clean it up.
So I've actually got color coming through his skin now. And if you feel like you still want to keep that amount of skin tone, but you want it slightly darker, instead of using your opacity, because that keeps taking it back to black, what I would do instead would be put a curve on here and group the curve to the tattoo alone, whatever, and then slightly darken it up there so that you actually keep it's on both now. Yeah, and so that's where we end up. So again, not really that reality there, whatever, but you cannot believe how good displacement mappings actually do work if you're trying to do this, other than just laying them on there. Because this is where we started compared to, no, I have no idea, till that. Make sense? Okay, so final projects, just keep working on that stuff and I'll see you guys next week. And I'll post the link to the video in here.
What's the homework?
Your final project.
Oh, I thought you said we did have our last homework.
No,
Work
Yeah.
in
work in class. You're,
Make sure that you got one of the images I dropped in.
oh yeah, and if anybody is dropping stuff, I will take it tonight.
What is that? What are we just dropping?
Late work.